Hello. So I'm trying to keep up with this podcast. It's pretty exciting to have a podcast and to have people who listen. So I just wanted to put that out there. I am on my third cup of coffee, but I think I deserve a third cup of coffee because I just took my dog for a walk in the freezing cold and I practically slipped in the ice. It was great, actually, to listen to the sound of my boots. I wasn't even wearing my boots. I was wearing my tennis shoes. When I was crunching over this frozen snow in this alley, and it was a really nice sound. And I thought, I like this sound, and I like that I can hear it. Even though I was listening to something, but in keeping with my New Year's sort of resolution to try and reduce the amount of outrage videos, podcasts, whatever, that I'm listening to, I wasn't listening to anything like that. I actually went back in time and decided to listen to music, to a time in my life where I didn't worry about things like the collapse of Western civilization and things like that. It was a kinder, gentler time. I didn't know it, but it was. Anyway, so what I was listening to was this work by two famous composers, Philip Glass, who's a minimalist composer, who I used to be addicted to his compositions and operas and all sorts of things. I mean, his work is pretty great if you can go in for that kind of trancey, minimalistic kind of stuff. And it's very, very interesting. Some people can't tolerate it. I actually really like it. So it was a collaboration between Philip Glass and Ravi Shankar, who's the famous Indian sitar master and composer. And so they collaborated on this work called Passages. And I used to listen to it obsessively when I was in the university in the early 90s. And back then I had this thing called it was either a Walkman or a Discman. I think it was a Walkman. Anyway, but no, maybe it was a Discman. It doesn't really matter. But the point is it was either a tape or a disc. Anyway, but so you walk around and, even then I always had to have something plugged into my ears and needing extra stimulation. But, it's an interesting thing. Like, why do we need so much stimulation? So that's an interesting question. I am asking myself that today. Before I went on my walk, I did read my story, my William Trevor story, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And that was a really good one, actually. It was called, where is it? Damn, where did I put my glasses? I have to wear reading glasses now, and it's really fun to be able to, I'm always misplacing them, so I think I need to, The Hill Bachelors, that's what the name of the story was. And it's really fascinating. The theme is about, well, I'm not going to get into that now, but it's very good. This takes place in an Irish countryside, mountainside, hillside. Anyway, so I did read the story, and it gave me a lot to think about, and I was pretty anxious when I read it, and my anxiety's up very high today for a number of reasons, so I was just sort of thinking about that, and it's down lower now that I've gone for my walk, and I'm going to be leaving for work soon. My client canceled today, and so they're going to come tomorrow, so I had some time to do this now. Anyway, so I read the story, but before I read the story, I, of course, woke up early, stayed up too late talking to my daughter about why she wants to be an artist, because she's writing all these statements to get into this art academy. And so we had to talk about that, and we hadn't talked for quite a long time, and she's a really intense person, and, trying to grow up, and it's interesting to be the mother of an artist type person, and it's not easy. It's not easy to be a mother in general, but I think artists are interesting people, or creative type people, sensitive type people, and there are unique challenges to raising a highly sensitive person and bringing them into the world. And I would say that most artists are highly sensitive people. And so it's interesting because we are so attached to the people that we are devoted to and the people that we love, and their sorrows or their concerns really impact us. And it's tricky when we realize how connected we are to people. You want to let them have their own life. That's the goal, but you can't deny the impact. Like right now, as I'm even talking about it, I feel like a pressure on my chest. But, I don't need to go into that too much, but it's, I think, just part of life, and it's good to pay attention to it and not be overwhelmed by it or too worried, because it's not unusual. I always tell myself when I'm feeling things that it's not very unusual, and sometimes that can help to offset the concerns. Anyway, but before I started reading the story, I, of course, had stayed up late talking to the daughter, and then I got up early, and I, of course, reached for my damn phone, and I had to see what was on Twitter, and then I had to listen to, I did listen to a bit of a YouTube channel, and Dave Rubin with Margaret Chow. I think Chow. I'm not sure. But anyway, so I watched that a little bit. And then as I was watching this, and then I had to read the comments because I find comments really interesting. They kind of complete the experience. Like, what did other people think of this? And I don't even know what I'm thinking when I'm reading comments. I can't really, I just have this kind of need to, like, I'm like analyzing data all the time. Sometimes I feel like that. So I have to like analyze the data of the world, like I'm taking a sample of the world or something when I go on Twitter. And then there was also something going on more about this situation, something with the alt-right again. There's the alt-right infighting, and I don't understand all of it at all. But I know that's something going on, and I find it sort of fascinating. Just, I'll just like read one thread and where somebody's being torn apart, and I'm like, why am I reading this? Do I need to know this? But I can't stop myself. So I was discouraged by my failure to get off Twitter as soon as I would like. But then I heard my husband coming up the stairs because he actually had to go to work. His vacation was over, and I grabbed for my book, and then he's like, were you just picking up that book because you heard me coming up the stairs and you were on your phone? And I'm like, yeah, I was on my phone, and I'm going to read the book now. So I did start reading. And honestly, as I am reading these stories, they're very well written, but my mind, my attention span for an actual story is really bad. It's poor now that I've been used to reading little snippets of thought and piecing literally the way I consume information is very collage-esque now. The world is all collage, and it's almost like my tolerance and patience for one coherent picture or portrait has somehow lessened. And I almost feel like it's the same way relationships are with people now, like Tinder relationships. It's like a collage. It's a buffet, of people and samplings instead of one relationship that you have and you care about. It's frightening. You feel like when you're, like, I'm just telling you, when I go into the story, just thinking about how it feels to read a story, the Hill Bachelors today, and it's like I realize, and I've thought this for some time, but even more so now that I'm so used to my data sampling, it makes me worry, like, do I have FOMO? Am I afraid of missing out because I want to devote myself to one coherent story told by one person? I don't know, like, you worry, or I worry, but the worry goes away. So my attention span was poor. I would persist. I would have to reread paragraphs. The language was a little bit difficult because it was kind of in the Irish dialect a little, because the story takes place in this, like I said, this Irish countryside, and it's these, I'll tell you what it is right now, actually. It's really good. So anyway, it was written, I believe, in 97 or something like that, and it's one of his more famous stories. There are like maybe 5 stories of this collection. It's called The Selected Stories. I think it came out in 2010. There are about 5 stories that were the leads in their own books, so they were, I think that they're the more famous stories. So I'm just choosing of how many stories are in this book. There are, I can't say it, like maybe 40 stories. So anyway, that's why I chose this one, because I'm just going for the most famous stories, or the ones that have had some notoriety. I don't know why that is, but that's what I did. Anyway, so it's hard to pull myself in, to rein myself in, but I managed after a couple pages. I managed to do it, and I told myself the story was going to help me, and I needed to continue. And I mean, I don't know how I managed back in the day when I got an English degree and I had to read actual novels, like Russian novels and things. I actually would sit for days reading, like Dostoevsky and Dickens and, Jane Austen and all this. Shakespeare kind of amazes me. I don't know. I don't know if it's bad that I've lost that, and I want to recapture it. I think it's possible, but there are a lot of, I didn't have the fear of missing out back then. Back then I just did it, and now there's something to overcome, and I think it can be overcome, but it's not easy. Anyway, so the Hill Bachelors is kind of about this, and that's what I love about these stories, is that they're like tarot cards or something. You read the story and you realize, wow, this really relates to what I'm talking about. And that's kind of profound when you think about it. So this is what happens. It starts with a death, of course, and it's a death of a farmer who lives up in these hills. It's a remote place, and it's a difficult, remote, high place. It's in an elevation, and this family has been living there for a couple generations at least. So it starts with, it's also omniscient narrator. So there's been a death of the father who's been running this farm up on the hill. And his wife remains his widow, and then she has 5 children. She is wondering what she's going to do up there because she knows she can't run this farm. And the farm was inherited. It was her inheritance from her husband. Well, it was her husband's family's farm. So when she first moved there as a girl, the husband's mother, had been the one who was up there on the hill, kind of running it. So she learned to be part of that community. It was very difficult. And so she was sort of wondering, of her 5 children who were returning, what her children would say about what was to become of her. So she has these 5 kids. She has 3 boys and 2 girls. The story kind of is about the youngest boy. His name is Polly, I believe, and he's the only one who hasn't really managed to make a life outside of the hillside farm. The others have. So it's about him, really. So he's got the 2 brothers and the 2 sisters, and but he's the one who he assumes, and everyone else assumes, and it comes to pass, that he's going to be the one who will end up remaining or offering to remain on the hill and help the mother with this farm, since he's never really made much of a living in the city or away from the farm, like the others have. The others have children. I think there are 9 children in all. Anyway, when he first learns of the death of his father, he has this woman that he has been courting, and he tells her, he really loves her, I think, or he wants to be with her. I think he's about 28 or 29 or something like that. And he tells her that, father's dead, and would you want to live up in this farmhouse and run this farm with me? And she essentially says, no, what would I do up there? I have no interest in being in a farmhouse. And I thought that was interesting because it's all about place. The farmhouse is a place, and he doesn't have relationships with people or women who that would be about him. It's about, I don't want to be at that farm. So anyway, so she says no, and so he returns, and he's there, and his siblings have gone, the funeral's over, and he tells his mother that he wants to stay on. And she doesn't want him to stay on in this remote place because her biggest concern is that he won't find anybody or any woman who will want to be his wife up there. Because there's this thing where she's noticed that in this generation, this generation and even the generation before, there were all these men who were called the Hill Bachelors, and that's because they couldn't get women who were interested in going up into this more remote area to kind of tend the land and to make an independent life on the land. And that the women preferred to be in town, and they would prefer... So he goes through, there's a little town at the bottom of the hill where he lives, and I'm skipping ahead here because I'm going to run out of time and I got to leave. Let's see, how much time do I have? Oh, I have a little bit of time. Anyway, so his mother's very aware that she doesn't want to make him a bachelor or ruin his chances for love. I hope that I'm speaking into the microphone. Anyway, but yet she doesn't stop him, and she can't stop him. And he says, no, I'm staying here with you. And the funny thing, I thought this was kind of fascinating. Of the 5 kids, she said at the very beginning that this boy was the one that was sort of ignored by the dad, and he was the least favored child. And the dad who was so devoted to this farm. One thing about the farm they make a big deal of is that there's a bog up there, and that you're always having to sort of work with this bog, and they're always trying to transform the bog into land that can be used for the farm. So it's a transformation of the land, a relationship of the farmer with the land. It's a very important feature in this story. And the men get very obsessed with their relationship to transforming the land. And anyway, that's one aspect of it. So she notices that when her son is there, she tells him to, go out and look at the pigs or the cattle or whatever. And she doesn't have to give him any instructions. And she says, even though he's been away for so long, he seemed to just know everything about how to run the farm, as if he'd never left. And then she realizes that even though he'd been sort of ignored by the dad for whatever reason, you wonder why the dad ignored him. Maybe they were too much alike. That's what I was thinking. Anyway, it turns out that he basically was sort of like able to fill in the father's position without a hitch in any way. Like, he understood. He just fell into the rhythm. Oh, that's my timer. But I set it ahead so that we'd have a little bit of time. Anyway, so it was like he had the same rhythm that the dad had. And he was really getting into it. And he liked it. And she was sort of pleased that he had this amazing ability to run this farm. Even it was very difficult managing this land and relating to this very difficult remote geography. Anyway, so she is telling the boy, your dad would be so proud of you. Who would have thought that you would be the one who would inherit his inherit what he had to give. None of the other kids, when they came, they came and went very quickly from the funeral. They, the author says that they didn't bring much in their suitcases. They didn't bring their children. They didn't bring their spouses. They were afraid almost to make their return to this land, and they were in and out very quickly. And they were, but not the son who is becoming the inheritor of this region. And I don't know, I just found this story kind of mesmerizing in a way. Back to the women. So there's some women in the town. It's a very tiny town at the bottom of the hill. It's a kind of town where like there's a gas station and a bar, and the same family owns all of the little small minor businesses that make up the town. And there's some daughters there of the shop owner, and one of them, he was hoping that she was still around because he'd really liked her when she was 15, when they were kids, but it turned out that she had moved away and gotten married to somebody. But there were other sisters, so he kind of goes through each sister, but each one, ends up saying, I don't want to live up there. And so they leave, and they go off, and they have no interest in going up to the hill and being a farm wife. And they would rather work in a fertilizer factory or have these menial jobs than to go up onto that hill. And I found that fascinating. Like, it was important to them to be part of, I don't know, kind of like me looking at Twitter. It's like, okay, they would rather work in a fertilizer factory, be, this repetitious job, anything, than to be up on this hill, having a farm, raising animals, having a relationship to your life that's so basic. But I think it was the remoteness and the need to sort of fill up your life yourself and fill up your mind yourself. They preferred to go into towns, and literally they all took menial, meaningless, tedious jobs. That's what all the women who said no to him did. So I found that sort of fascinating, that people in this story were afraid of the hills. So as time goes by, he sort of loses his mother does die, and by the time she dies, what happens here? The brothers and sisters come again, and he's pretty much he's kind of gotten really into this relationship with the bog and the land, and increasing. He's literally relating to land. He's finding this world in the farm to be really deeply, like profoundly satisfying. So he's not too worried about it, but about having a woman, even though he does try and he doesn't want to be alone. And people will talk about it all the time. Don't you want a woman? Don't you want a woman? I don't know. It's sort of interesting. If anybody has anything to say about this, I go ahead and say it in the comments. But I think it's interesting. Let's see. So there's this one guy. His name is Hadigan, and at one point he learns that the last of these daughters in town has told Polly, "No, I don't want you," and that's the one who says she's like the least attractive one. So she was the last one left, and she says, "I can't." She goes on a number of dates with him, but finally she's like, I just can't do this, and she leaves, and she wants to go work in the fertilizer factory. So people are thinking, well, he's going to be desperate. He can't be alone up there. So it's, this little town, and they're all sort of thinking about him. But there are other Hill Bachelors, right? So they're sort of known, and they have their own farms. But apparently their land wasn't as good as his family's land. Anyway, so this one guy who has never found a woman to come up there with him, obviously because he's a Hill Bachelor. Anyway, he comes over and he offers to buy the big field. His big, it's sort of like the pride of the family. There's this one really big field that the father the Father has basically created and in all of his efforts throughout the years, and now the Son is also working on that. And he comes up and says, you don't need to stay here. I can buy this field, and you can be free, and you can go down into the city and live a regular life. And he basically says, no, I don't want to give up this field. And so there's this transformation has taken place where he becomes very attached. Anyway, and he says, in the end, his mother he's having a memory of his mother saying, "Don't stay long when you go out into the field," and he said, and the author says, guilt was misplaced, goodness hardly came into it. Her widowing and the mood of a capricious time were not of consequence, no more than a flicker in the scheme of things that had always been there. Enduring, unchanging, the hills waited for him, claiming one of their own. And that's the end. And I thought, well, what he was attracted to was something unchanging and enduring, and he was claimed by this longing for something more eternal. And I don't know, I thought that was really beautiful. I think there are a lot of people who are wanting something eternal and wanting something enduring, but they don't want it because they're afraid to be alone, because they're afraid that others won't join them there. And that could be the case. So that's probably where I'm going to end it. I think if you do have a hungering for something that's more outside of time, something a little bit more transcendent, which I don't think I think it's pretty easy to long for something like that when you live in a day and age like ours, which literally it moves so quickly. You really have to make a decision if you're going to just be caught up in this fast-paced, Twitter world. I mean, the Twitter world really is very symbolic of everything, I think. Or if you're able to sustain yourself away from that for even the time it takes to read a story, a short story. And, there's rewards in that. There's rewards in stepping away and going toward something that is more eternal and enduring and unchanging. And you just need to risk feeling a little bit alone. But I don't think we really are. I mean, when I read this, I thought, this is me, and this was this person who wrote this, had these feelings, and this is all of us. And we're going to be okay. And I don't want to work in a fertilizer factory, I want to be the person who's willing to be alone for a while, to be able to have my own life and my own relationship to something greater, and then come back and, connect with people when the time is right. So, I don't know, I guess somebody else might read this more tragically. Maybe what I'm saying is kind of tragic. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I do think that there's always the fear of losing out on the temporary, kind of temporal life if you want something more. So that's it for now. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I'll try and get this out as soon as I can. All right. Take care. Bye.